Hello, welcome to the Bible K through 12. This is for adults, especially those adults who don't have a clue what the Bible is all about. We have been working on the Old Testament for a long time. We're in grade 6, and this particular segment and the ones following it are going to center around the first two chapters of the whole Old Testament, which I have avoided and have not at all discussed until this point. So I'll kind of get into why I avoided them sometime later. The first two chapters are very important and they're very controversial. But I'm not going to try to get too heavily involved in controversy. So this first part I call the 7 days of creation, and it focuses on chapter 1, verse 1 through chapter 2, verse 3. And I'm just going to pretty well plow through those verses, not quite verse by verse, but section by section. So it all begins at the beginning. That's a good place. And it just simply says, in the beginning. What was that? What was that like? What was going on? Who was there? Had there been anything happening before then? There's just so many questions that we have that we don't know the answers to. All we know is in the beginning. And then we have this enormous statement: God created the heaven and the earth. And in a sense, that first verse is a summary of everything else that comes after. Verse 2 then is sort of a preface, kind of sets the scene for the next verse. So it says that the earth was without form and void. It was empty. And this gives us the need that there needs to be something to fill up that void. And it also says that darkness was over the face of the earth. Now, you may have experienced darkness, and you know, in a sense, there are degrees of darkness. You know, on a moonlit night, you go outside, it's dark, but it's not that dark. You know, you can kind of make out some things. When the moon's not out, it's darker. But if the sky is covered with clouds and there's no moon, then it's even darker. Now, try to imagine the darkest moment of your life, and that this was darker than that. No light whatsoever. Then there is one other statement in this verse, and it says that the Spirit was hovering over the face of the deep, or over the face of the water on earth. Even though it's dark, God is in action. He is not ignoring creation. He is intimately present with it. So that sets the stage then for what we call the days of creation. The first action, the creation of the heaven and the earth, the presence of the Spirit, these do not count as days. It was necessary that something be present, and that presence was light. There had to be light. So light is created. Now, what does that mean? Because there's no source that is stated for the light. Where did the light come from? It's one possibility, just something to just kind of throw out there, is that this statement that God created light is a statement of the existence of light. Now, those of you who have some scientific background are aware of the electromagnetic spectrum, that there are wavelengths of light that are below the visual spectrum of the ultraviolet, and then there are wavelengths that are beyond the visual spectrum, the long waves, or the infrared. So there are these kinds of experiencers or kinds of phenomena that are on that electromagnetic spectrum that had to exist in order for light to exist. Yeah, that's just a thought. We don't know. All we know is that God created light. And of course, there is a spiritual component to light. And it just kind of hints at the fact that it's not just the physical nature of light that's in mind here, but it's beyond that. It's the spiritual nature of light. Day 2, and it says, by the way, evening and morning, the first day. Now, for the Hebrew, the day started with sundown, the evening, and then it continued all through the night and through the next day until the next sundown. So that's why it always says evening and morning, the first or the second and so forth day. Day 2. Now this one is a mystery, as was the first day, and that is that God created the firmament. Some translations say the sky. It is also referred to as heaven. It is up there. It is that dome up there that we can kind of see and kind of imagine that it is something. But what it is, we don't know. And what the writer had in mind, we don't know. Nevertheless, it was there now. And then it mentions water. It says there was water above the firmament and water below the firmament. What that's all about, we just don't know. Day 3. 2 things happen. First of all, it says that the waters were gathered, so that you get the idea of the water being spread out over the whole earth, and now they are gathered into finite places that are called the seas. Possibly lakes were in mind, as well as salton seas. But there are now these places where there's water, and there's places where there's dry land. And then in connection with this water, there are, and with this land, there is vegetation, uh, green plants. There's, of course, a type of green plant or algae, unicellular organisms that can perform photosynthesis. And so we now have the possibility of photosynthesis, the production of oxygen. We also have a food source, we'll see later. The vegetation is now created. Day 4. Now, here's another mystery. Here's another strange thing. And, it kind of unsettles us. And that is that the major light-giving sources or structures are now mentioned. The sun, the moon, and the stars. Well, why weren't they made first and then they produce light? Well, I don't know. We just don't know. And how could the vegetation spring forth until there was light from the sun? Perhaps that light that's mentioned before was still there and could help the vegetation. Now, I'm going to throw something out here, and I'll just take it occasion at this moment to do so. Notice if you read through those days of creation, it says again and again, God said, let there be. I think we can think of, this is just a conjecture, that these are God's orders. Like a general says, okay, all you captains, all you lieutenants, all you sergeants, all you enlisted men, here are my orders. You do this and you do that. Now, he may make that order, but carrying it out may take time. Carrying it out will be coordinated, but it will not necessarily be quite in the order that he spoke those orders. And so it's possible that what we're seeing here are the orders, the decrees from God, that this and that and this and that be created. But when they are created, how they are created, how much time it took to create them, may be a mystery. Something to think about. So we've gone through 4 days, and now day 5 is starting to get a little more exciting. The sea creatures are made, and the birds. So we have these organisms that swim in the oceans and in the lakes and in the rivers, and it describes them as teeming, just bunches of them, which those who were fishermen would know about when they pulled up their nets and they saw all those fish. So fish, whales, porpoises, sea snakes, perhaps lobsters, and other forms of sea life, as well as the birds in the sky, are now created in day 5. Each day, at the end, it says evening and morning. In this case, day 5. And the other thing that we find is that God repeatedly pronounces it good. It's good. It's a good creation. It's not evil. It's good. Day 6. Day 6 is a very big time day. First of all, the land creatures, the buffalo, the wild dogs, the deer, the antelope, if you're in Kansas, all of these amazing creatures that roam across the face of the earth. They're created. And it says out of the dust. They just come out of the dust to be created. And then there is a pause. There is some attention given to this next creation. It is human beings. And they are made from the dust also. But it is commented that they are made in the image of God. Now that doesn't necessarily mean that God looks like a man, that God has, silver hair or blue eyes or, 6'6" and broad shoulders. It doesn't say it's not saying that, but whatever God is, there is a reflection of that in the human. She is made in the image of God. And notice, male and female. So it's not a matter that just the man has the image of God. Woman also has the image of God. They are the human species. Now, anticipating chapter 2, I want to emphasize that this is a discussion or a description of the human species. The humans were created. It's not focusing in on a particular couple. It's talking about the human species is being created. And then the Lord God says, okay, see all these plants? This is your food. Vegetarian. All of you, you've got now a source for food and the energy that it gives. And of course, once again, God says it's good, but now he adds a little punch to it. It is very good. Now, it is important to get that, because sometimes we, from reading the Bible, from hearing preachers, from going to church, from learning about all sorts of things in the world, we begin to get the idea that there is evil, that this whole creation thing is bad. And what we need to do is get away from matter, things that are the flesh and bone, rocks and trees, mountains. That's not something we need to desire. What we need to do is get out of this whole mess. And that is a false understanding of what God is calling us to. It is very good. Now there's some problems. There's some problems that come along. But right at this point, in the point of creation, it is very good. Seventh day actually is described in chapter 2. The first 3 verses are a part of that whole sequence that begins in chapter 1. And it says that God rested. Now, it's important to get it that the word rest refers to ceasing of activity. It doesn't mean God was tired. It just means that God was done. God was through with creation. So he quit creating. He rested. And he blessed the 7th day. It's the end of work. it calls upon us no longer to focus on business, making a living, all the things that we think are so overwhelmingly important. We need to take a break from that. And it wants us to rest in God and focus on God. This day, the seventh day, and that gets complicated down the road, but the seventh day belongs to God and is holy. So we focus not on business, not on making a living, not on getting all our to-do lists done, but we focus on holy, on what God is interested in. Now, you might want to look this up in the 4th chapter of Hebrews, first 11 verses. It talks about the Sabbath. And it says there remains a Sabbath rest that God has in store for us. A Sabbath. God has in store for us a perfect, holy rest. A day that belongs to God and is a gift to us. And that is salvation. All right. That finishes those 7 days of creation. And we'll progress from there in the next video. Thank you for watching the Bible K through 12.